Nothing like a hard day's work out in the countryside. Sure beats working in the city, staring at a screen all day. Yeah, just can't beat it. The warm sun in your face, the sound of the farm animals, the smell of fresh hay on the breeze blowing through. I think it's getting a bit too immersive now. Oh shit, I think that's my hay fever. Oh god!
Stardew Valley is one of my favourite games of all time, taking all the best parts of Harvest Moon and combining them with stunning pixel art, a beautiful soundtrack, and a metric shitload of content. It's one of those special games that makes you feel nostalgic for a series that I wasn't even a fan of, and most astonishingly of all, it was made by just one guy, ConcernedApe, aka Eric Barone. I've been wanting to make a tribute to Stardew Valley for a long time now. It's been sitting in the back of my mind for literally years, and in the end I thought, well, what better way for me to pay tribute to this amazing generational game than through my artwork? Stardew Valley's art style is a rose-tinted celebration of the 16-bit Harvest Moon games, given a full 32-bit makeover with more detail and colours than the Super NES could ever handle back in the day. And one place where that detail is put to great use is with its characters. You see, the fictional Pelican Town where the game takes place is filled with characterful residents, each with their own charming pixel art portraits accompanying their in-game sprites, giving the player a window into their state of mind. So I thought it might be fun to try and recreate these portraits in a more realistic rendition. Of course, this will only be my interpretation of how I see these characters. Obviously, when looking at these icons, you might see something completely different, and that's okay. There's a level of abstraction inherent to the medium of pixel art that allows the player to form their own level of emotional attachment. That's kind of the beauty of these older games. There's so much more room for the player's imagination. Beside the whole realism angle, there's one mandate that I gave myself going in, and it's that I wanted them to look like, well, real people. Not supermodels or movie stars or anime characters with the ray tracing turned on. I wanted something more modest to a degree, more down to earth. I think that's one of my biggest disappointments with a lot of the more realistic takes on these characters online. That when artists try to make them realistic, they kind of just mean more beautiful. They tend to turn each character into these flawless dolls that look interchangeable with every other super hot and sexy anime character out there. And do not get me started on those AI slop videos, by the way. Just ugh. Get out of my face! I don't like it. Part of the charm of Stardew Valley is how it reflects this earnest desire for connection, from rewarding you as you build up your relationships with the residents, to the themes of community over corporate interest, to even its origins as a solo passion project, one man's dream to rekindle the best part of his favourite game series and share it with a new generation. Stardew Valley is a game about relationships, to your farm, to your income, to your new town, and especially the people around you, so above all else, I wanted to preserve that feeling most of all. The residents of Pelican Town aren't just pixels, they're people. And I want every person who sees my paintings to feel like they're looking at a real person, flaws and all. Someone you could just run into while down the shops. Of course, most of them will still be attractive to a degree. Let's be real, that is one of the main appeals of these characters, but I want that beauty to come from a more grounded place. However, I still want to retain most of the DNA of the game's art style, because honestly, Stardew Valley is one of the most gorgeous games I've ever seen. Its pixel art is just perfect. It's vibrant and simple and deeply nostalgic. To capture that feeling, I wanted to take a slightly different approach to my usual techniques. I wanted to lean into a more artistic direction to make these portraits feel like lovingly crafted paintings rather than digital images. So I decided to push the boat out and embrace one of my lesser utilized mediums, watercolor. A bit of history. Watercolor was invented by Monsieur Water, who grew up in Watermain, France, and was created by grinding up some color fairies into usable... Hang on. Right, well, that's the last time I asked ChatGPT for anything. No, watercolour is actually one of the oldest forms of paint, dating all the way back to cave paintings in the Paleolithic era. It didn't gain prominence as a medium until the Renaissance, but it really came into its own during the 18th century in England, when cleric William Gilpin went around the country painting these landscapes as he went. People really latched onto these paintings as they offered these small romantic glimpses into the beauty spots of the country in this pre-tourism era, and this really helped solidify watercolour as the national art of England at the time. William Gilpin even created the term picturesque specifically to describe this type of grand landscape painting. And you can tell why, because watercolour has this knack for depicting light. It's a very gentle medium that thrives on the subtler details and requires a fine touch to really master, which of course is why I'll be doing so on my iPad with my Apple Pencil and rigorous use of the undo button. What? Canvases ain't cheap, you know. The actual watercolor brush that Procreate provides is ass. Don't use it. If you want a more accurate watercolor look, then there are 3 brushes in particular I like to use, and luckily for you guys, they come built into Procreate for free. No extra downloads necessary. For your big washes of colour, I like to use the Spectra brush. It works really well for putting down these large, thin coats of colour that you'll later work into. Then for the small details, we have the Tamar brush. This is really good for shading as it has this really nice consistency along the edges of the paint that gives the brush a lot of character. And as for colour mixing in the latter stages, I tend to use the gouache brush on a really low opacity. It's really good for blending colours while also maintaining a nice texture. And finally, for those really precise details like sharp highlights or dark edges of shadows, I use the peppermint pencil over the top. But enough about me rambling on about painting on this art channel about art. You're interested in Stardew Valley, and hey, who can blame you? So let's say we take a look at who I've chosen as my first subject, and of course, let's have a bit of fun with it. Introducing the brand new segment on the channel, it's Stardew Valley! Name's pending, by the way. The online dating show where we help the single residents of Pelican Town find love. And for our first contestant, let's give it up for the renowned, the intelligent, the handsome Dr. Harvey! This well-earned bachelor is the town doctor, a bit more seasoned than some of our other contestants, but with plenty of love still to give. Harvey likes to spend the most of his time in the medical clinic, and nothing brings him greater purpose than helping others. What a sweetheart. He also enjoys coffee, pickles and wine, and simply can't stand chocolate cake, ice cream, and pizza.
Okay, that's a bit of a tough sell there, Harvey.
But as a practicing medical professional, let's just say he knows what's good for the heart. How could you not fall for the sweeping hair, the brainy specs, and that finely groomed stoush? I bet it has its own degree. So the first step of this process will just be sketching it out, trying to find the shapes that make these characters unique, as you can see from this sketch that I prepared earlier. Why don't I have footage of actually sketching it like every other video on this channel? Well, that's because someone accidentally saved over his footage without backing it up first, because I am a professional YouTuber who definitely knows what he's doing. I have a Patreon, by the way. Now, as you can see, Harvey has a bit of a rounder, longer face, like a capsule almost, or a tic-tac, which I've tried to capture in this initial sketch. I wanted to aim for about mid-30s, but you'll see me slightly tweak that as we go along. Now time for the first stage of watercolor, which means blocking out the dark shadows on the face, getting the main contours of the head like the cheeks, the brow and the chin. Then you move on to mixing with some more saturated colors to imbue the skin with some vibrancy. A nice wash of orange, very lightly added to get those values in around the borders of the shadows, leaving the lighter areas alone for now. Then I chose to paint in the eyes, giving them that deep brown colour to help me get a better grasp of the tonal values of the piece. From there it's onto his clothes, which are really simple, just a green jacket, a white button-up shirt and an orange tie. Really easy stuff. I will admit, in the painting process they do end up looking a bit too shiny. I was trying to get the details of the fold to stand out and emulate the colours of the original pixel art, but I think I went a bit too far in that regard, so I end up tweaking it by the end. I also think the straight-on light source kind of muddles things a bit in that regards, but rendering clothes in watercolor is something I'll undoubtedly get better at as I hone in on my preferred techniques. His hair is another thing that took time to sort of figure out in this medium. I find when painting in watercolor it's best not to treat every strand as its own object, but rather to pick out the larger clumps and treat those like waves as you're painting them in. You can afford to be a bit more vague here. It's quite nice to let the hair be more of an ambiguous shape with its own character. I also found that inking in the hair to such a fine level of detail kind of limits your ability to get really expressive with it. I think for next time I might pare it back slightly and let that area breathe a bit, and it would also save me a lot of time. Of course, that all depends on whether you want your line art to be a boundary or a guide. And for some mediums like comics, you definitely want to be precise, but with watercolor you can afford to be a bit more lax about the actual shapes. It's a very playful medium, I find, and something as detailed as hair works best playing by its own rules. After that, it's just working out the tie. and filling in the shading on the shirt. I find that using a light blue rather than grey gives the best result. Very light at first and then blocking in the darkest segments with this really saturated blue. It gives this lovely result. As I reached the end of the painting, I felt that the singular light source didn't really give the comforting vibe of the game, even if it is accurate to the pixel art, so I decided to add a sharp rim light around the piece. As you can see, I really packed it on at this stage, but I do end up dialing it back significantly in the end. I think it gives the portrait more of a presence and fits better with the background I added, which is just some key artwork from the game. And with nothing left to add, it's finally time to see the result. Ladies and gentlemen, let's give a warm hand to Harvey! You certainly clean up well, Harvey. What have you got to say for the folks at home? Oh, what a guy, ladies and gentlemen, what a guy. A pretty good first attempt. You can definitely tell I was learning as I went along, so thank you, Harvey, for being my guinea pig in this whole endeavour. But now, let's move on to our next contestant. This one is a personal favourite of mine, a woman after my own heart, the elusive, the talented, the lovely Leah! This nature-loving bachelorette is the red rose of Pelican Town, and I'm definitely not just saying that because I married her on my first playthrough. Living in her own little cottage just to the south of Marnie's farm, Leah is a shy but passionate artist. Oh, it was meant to be. Who moved into Pelican Town to find a simpler way of life. Maybe she'll end up finding something more. Like love. Wow. Okay, well, no, come back. When she's not creating her next masterpiece, her other loves include salads, goat's cheese, and stir-fry, like I think most of us, am I right? And she simply cannot stand seaweed, hash browns, or pancakes. Okay, well, no one's perfect. However, what better way to honour an artist than through art? And I'm going to do my best to give our favourite urban auteur the treatment she deserves. Now, this is where I started to butt heads a bit with Stardew Valley's art style, because it gets to a point where a lot of the female characters can kind of blend together in terms of face shape and their features outside of the hair, of course. For example, let's compare Leah with Penny. They both look quite similar when you meet them in isolation, but it's only via direct comparison when their differences really become apparent. In this pixel art style, there are certain features that you can just feel, that you can almost subconsciously pick out. There's this funny principle where the more you abstract a subject, the more small details really stand out in comparison, so we're going to have to extrapolate and exaggerate those differences. From what I can discern, Leah has these defined cheeks with a thin face and a pointy chin, so I'm going to use that as a base and just give her nice coy smile. You can see she has quite a small nose, although that's undoubtedly a stylistic choice, but I'm incorporating that here as well. Ironically, one of the hardest parts of the sketching phase was drawing the shoulders and the chest at this very specific 3/4 angle, just trying to nail down the right shapes and perspective. It's a very specific flaw of mine that since I've been drawing superheroes for so long with their really exaggerated musculature, I'm actually a bit out of practice with drawing realistic proportions when the muscle groups are kind of obscured. And women too are a bit of a challenge because their muscle density is very different from men's, so they have much flatter pectorals leading down to the breasts, a much slimmer neck and less pronounced trapezius, or at least in this case, every body is different after all. It was also a challenge just to get the pose right. You want those slightly hunched over shoulders rolling past the chest to convey a more relaxed posture. I had a lot of fun trying to find out exactly what hairstyle she has. It's like this intricate pulled back knot leading down into this lovely long braid over the shoulders. For reference, I am an egg, so hair doesn't really come as naturally to me. It's hard to find reference for specific hairstyles when you can barely name them. But that's where the cosplayers came in clutch. They were really helpful in getting the intricacies of the hair down, and especially for drawing the braid and how it sits down past the neck. I tend to use cosplayers a lot whenever I'm struggling for reference because they're the ones who will take the most literal approach in adapting their source material. It's a really valuable insight. Now for the clothes, I interpreted her outfit as her wearing this dark green waistcoat over a light green long sleeve shirt rolled up past the elbows with a lavender undershirt to complete the ensemble. Drawing those was just a matter of making sure they sit properly on the body while also not obscuring the shoulders too much. Once the clothes have been sorted out, then it's on to refining the the sketch into a more suitable line art for painting, including every single thread of her hair. I'm definitely not doing that next time. Although in the process I did find a shortcut. I did render quite a few of the strands, but I only did so when blocking out separate shapes, like how it flows across the ear and the way it twists along the back of the neck down into the braid. Just defining those shapes that aren't clear from the silhouette, then using some light shading with pencil to get some depth for the overall shapes of the hair. I might have to experiment with this in my own time, but anyway, enjoy the process. Now it's time for painting. As with Harvey, I started with the face first, blocking in the darkest shadows, then moving on to a general wash of colour, leaving the highlights masked off to prevent any mixing there. You can tell I had some really good reference material for this one because I was much more confident in my painting, knowing exactly which places needed to have colour. It also helps that this angle is much more conducive to this lighting scenario, naturally making the face a much more interesting shape to render. I made Leah's skin much more tan than Harvey, since I really do see her as the outdoorsy type rather than someone who would naturally spend all day indoors like Harvey. Leah isn't afraid to get her hands dirty. It's the reason why she moved to Pelican Town in the first place, after all. And then we start on painting the hair, which is really easy. It's just putting down this nice saturated wash of orange, ending up with this rich, deep colour as the base, and then working in this dark brown to smoothly describe the shapes of her hair, and then using peppermint pencil on top of that to add in those sharp highlights. You just get the best of both worlds here. As for her eye colour, I interpreted it as this dark purple, and I think it really works here. It's a nice complement to the orange and tan of the rest of her palette. Now for the clothes, and here I won't be masking off any highlights, but instead giving them a full coat to bring the base colour right down, like the hair, before adding in shadows as we go. Of course the shirt went a little differently, but then again it's a different material and slightly lighter than the rest, so the rules vary. The final touches are just adding in the rim light, much less intense this time around, only adding a tiny bit of highlight to the forms, just as a little flourish. And now, our lovely contestant has made many works of art over the years, but none, I say, compare to herself. Let's give it up for Leah! My god, is she not the muse of all muses? Not to throw any shade at Harvey, of course, but I think Leah might just edge him out of the running of the most eligible bachelorette. Not that Harvey is a bachelorette, of course. Well, actually, I don't know. Let's ask him. Harvey, do you feel bonita? Stunning. Thank you for your service. But yes, I am really happy with this painting. I think it really captures the spirit of the character in a very specific way, and this is where you can really tell I've locked in the process, which means the next painting should be even better. So let's waste no time and introduce our next and final contestant, probably the one whose face is on the thumbnail, let's be honest, the rebellious, the mysterious, the absolutely enchanting Abigail! This particular contestant is one of the most popular bachelorettes in Pelican Town, at least among the online community, and how can you blame them, because this lovely lass is a bona fide capital G gamer. And she's into the occult. I say what now? What was that you just said? And while she may dislike holly, sugar, and horseradish, she makes up for it with her love of rocks, like amethysts, for example. Look how she cherishes this precious mineral straight from the mine. Huh. Well, despite her alternative tendencies, shall we say, she's still one of our most admired residents, so it's only right that she gets the watercolor treatment. Are we ready? Let's go. Starting with our sketch, after consulting her sprite, I decided Abigail would have a slightly longer face, but with quite round cheeks to give her that girl next door type of face, while still being quite eye-catching. The face you could imagine belonging to a Twitch streamer. Oh god, how is that the worst thing I've said today? Of course, this is easier said than done. Trying to get a specific vibe for a face is not exactly a cakewalk, because we're so hardwired to recognize and distinguish the faces we see every day. In fact, a good amount of this process was just the sketching portion, trying to refine the face and the details of the hair. Eventually you get to a point where you see features you recognize in your drawing, only to find that they're not the ones you wanted. They're just not quite right. Like trying to replicate a tune only for it to be slightly out of key. Luckily, however, I have the safety net of digital software to help me, letting me go back and refine things to a greater degree than if this were on a real canvas, thank god. Her clothes and hair didn't really put up as much of a fight. It's fairly self-explanatory, just a matter of filling in the details, making sure it all makes sense and sits correctly on her head and her body, but luckily, I once again had cosplayers to aid me with that. Abigail wears this blue denim vest with frayed sleeves over a black zip-up vest as well as this black choker, helping to complete this kind of casual punk-inspired ensemble. But with the purple hair, it really does lean into this whole pastel goth movement, which, again, I'm sorry, it's kind of like a Twitch streamer. From there, it's just inking over the sketch. Once that's done, it's time to paint, and unlike the sketching phase, the painting phase went really smoothly. You can see I have a lot more confidence in rendering the shapes of the face this time around. Once you know what you're doing, the actual process becomes this really therapeutic, repetitive task. I love watching the painting slowly come into itself through every subsequent layer. The hair as well was very simple, mostly because you have these really rich blues and purples to play with that blend really nicely into each other. I know in game people say it's actually blue, but my eyes do not deceive me, that is purple right there, and I will not be told otherwise. Unless I'm actually slightly colorblind and I didn't even know it and it actually is blue, then maybe I am wrong. Could you imagine this is how I find out I'm colorblind? But yeah, to me it's purple, so I'm painting it purple. Although her hair was originally blue in early development before being changed to purple later down the line. Fun fact. Painting the clothes by this point is practically an afterthought. You've got this blue denim, which is quite naturally dark, as well as the black zip-up, so it's really easy. Just a couple of washes over those areas, just blocking in shadows. Then onto the highlights, getting some nice detailing in the hair especially, and that's it. She's ready for her spotlight, so take it away, ladies and gentlemen, it's Abigail! Now, I know we have a lot of fans of Abigail in the audience right now, but I think we can agree that even with my meager artistry, her personality really shines through, breaking hearts and probably her own teeth on all those amethysts. She sure is a face you won't soon forget, and hopefully this painting does her a service. But why take my word for it? I'm going to pass it over to the audience. What do you guys think? Comment down below which painting is your favorite, and let me know if this is something you want to see more of in the future. I love Stardew Valley, and this whole video was just an excuse to listen to the soundtrack while painting. I had a really great time, and if you want to see more videos like this, then give it a thumbs up, maybe subscribe, and if you're really feeling bold, then head over to my Patreon, where you can get sneak peeks at all my artwork before it's uploaded anywhere else. Until next time, happy farming, folks!
Yep, that's still paid people. Okay.